Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Like Catherine said, my name is Austin. So I'm a regular attender here at Trinity. I started coming in 2016, which was coincidentally when I started my PhD program. So I've somewhat come full circle. I just graduated I'm going to graduate next week, finish the dissertation. And over the past couple of years, I've kind of been discerning a call to ministry. So I'm trying to figure out what that looks like. And I'm very thankful for the pastors here providing me with opportunities to share the word of God with you. So tonight's message is commonly known as the Walk to Emmaus. And the scripture actually takes place 3 days after Easter, so it's particularly relevant. So I was inspired by Henry Nouwen. I don't know if you know, he is a Dutch theologian who passed away in the late 90s, but has become one of the main sources of inspiration for the message that I'm going to share tonight. He has a chapter in his book the book is called Reaching Out, and the chapter is called Creating Space for Strangers, and that's kind of the theme of tonight's message. So I'll start by asking the question, what does the word hospitality mean to you? Now, in my mind, when I hear the word hospitality, I think of inviting friends over for a dinner party, or enjoying a cozy movie night with my family, or just experiencing kindness from another person. Hospitality is a key virtue in Scripture, showing up in both the Old and New Testaments. However, the Bible's mentioning hospitality goes deeper than just telling us to welcome someone into our homes. They point toward hospitality as a way to appreciate the guests we welcome for their unique and valuable gifts, and to be eager in receiving them. In Genesis chapter 18, Abraham hosted 3 strangers at Mamre, and offered them water, bread, and a calf. And in doing so, they revealed themselves to be God, announcing to Abraham's wife, Sarah, that she would be pregnant at 8 years old. In 1 Kings chapter 17, the widow of Zarephath gave up food and shelter to Elijah, who then revealed himself to be a prophet of the Lord, and offered her oil and flour to bake bread, and then raised her son from the dead. And so another place where hospitality shows up is in the Gospel of Luke. And that's the scripture I'm going to be reading tonight. Shortly after the recounting of Jesus' crucifixion, death on the cross, and resurrection. And so before we get into the scripture, I'd like to just pray before we do that. Heavenly Father, we are so gracious and thankful for this space that you provided us to come here and worship. Lord, I ask that your Spirit descends upon me, and that I'm inspired by your grace and your love to give this message, and that I am able to speak and convey, and that there are ears to hear. Lord, I pray that all that we say and do reflect the will of your kingdom. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. So this is known as the Walk to Emmaus. It's rather long, but follow along with me. This is Luke chapter 24, verses 13 to 35. Now on that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. And now our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they did not see him. Then he said to them, 'Oh, how foolish you are, And how slow of the heart to believe all that the prophets declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory? Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interrupted to them the things about himself and all the scriptures. As they came near to the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it's almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known to him in the breaking of the bread. And this is the word of God for the people of God, and God's people said, "Thanks be to God." Now the opening scripture shows several unnamed disciples traveling to Emmaus, a small village a few miles outside Jerusalem. Christ's crucifixion, death on the cross, and resurrection are fresh on their minds, occurring only a few days before. The disciples are discussing and deliberating about what happened when suddenly Jesus appears to them, but God hides his true identity. He is instead walking alongside the disciples as a stranger. Jesus then begins to question them about what they are talking about. And in recounting the event that happened 3 days ago, the disciples express disappointment. They had hoped to be rescued by a warrior-like Savior, but instead watched their would-be Messiah die on the cross at the hands of the religious and political leaders. Speculating about the man from Nazareth and how they heard his body was never found, Jesus rebukes the disciples, calling them fools, and uses the rest of the walk to Emmaus as a teaching, showing them how all of this was predicted by the scriptures. When they approach Emmaus, Jesus seems like he's ready to leave, but the disciples invite them into their home. This is when the stranger is revealed to be Jesus himself. Just as he breaks bread, blesses it, and offers to them, and he disappears quickly as he came. Awestruck, the disciples immediately travel back to Jerusalem and share the message and the news and proclaim that Jesus indeed has risen. The final segment of this text is what really speaks to me the most. And above all else in tonight's reading, it's in my view the most important example of hospitality in the Bible. The walk to Emmaus isn't about the disciples simply letting a stranger into their home after a long and tiring day. It's about allowing their guests to reveal who he really is, offering his gifts, and bearing God's image toward them. Oftentimes, we look at strangers with hesitation or even hostility. People who we are unfamiliar with, speak a different language, are of a different color, or love people different than who we love, make us scared or even hostile. And the world tells us that because the strangers are different than us, they must pose some sort of a threat, and it's up to them to change our lives. Even with the best intentions, we may want to help strangers, but we still don't value them for the gifts that they bring to our lives. The thing is, many times we fail to acknowledge the times when we have been a stranger, which leaves us both complacent and ambivalent in our own walk to Emmaus. So I'll ask another question. When are the times that you have been a stranger? For me, I have felt like a stranger for most of my life. This summer will be 5 years since I came out as gay. Now, the walk of a gay Christian is a very lonely one. And society has been more accepting in recent years, but that still doesn't take away the fact that I am, and always will be, fundamentally different than 90% of the population of the world. For much of my life, I was a stranger to myself. I had planned on keeping my sexuality a secret and to die with it without telling anyone. And I dealt with years and years of shame and constantly questioning why. I spent many nights lying in bed, pleading to God and praying for everything to go away. And I would say over and over again, please, anything that is. So I spent years trying to overcome it, thinking that if I just prayed harder, went to church more, had a better relationship with God, then everything would be okay. But it wasn't. It wasn't okay. And a few years ago, I reached a breaking point. It was at this breaking point that I was welcomed as a stranger from the two most unlikeliest of sources: the church and my family. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering why I mentioned family, but for many LGBT people, family is not a place where they're welcome. In fact, according to the Pew Research Center, 40% of homeless youth in America identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, meaning that they were most likely thrown out of their homes after coming out. Mm-hmm. And at first, I didn't believe that. Sometimes we see statistics and we don't really identify with them. But I went to a conference in Orlando last fall, and in one of the sessions, we kind of went around the room and people were talking about their relationships with their parents. And I'm not exaggerating when over half the room talked about either one, after coming out, their parents don't speak to them anymore, or two, they withdrew financial support and were forced to live with a distant relative or a close friend. And I'm just sitting in the back and I'm watching people one by one saying this. Now, in my journey, I have not experienced this, but I can tell you that it is a very real issue playing itself out every day. Now, I was first welcomed as a stranger by my parents in their own way, and I was valued for the gifts and affirmed for who I am. It wasn't instant. It's taken several years, but my relationship with my parents has never been better, and their marriage has never been better. A few weekends ago, they came to visit, and I asked my mom while we were out to dinner. Sometimes I ask them, how's your marriage going? And they're approaching 30 years of marriage, and I feel like that's a rarity nowadays. I feel like that's a huge milestone, a huge landmark. And she said, Austin, we've never been better. And I said, oh, why? And she replied by saying, since you were honest with us, your father and I are more honest with each other now. Now, I have long feared that my decision to come out would tear their marriage apart, as many people fear it will. Picking sides, getting confused. But I was wrong. Instead, I was welcomed as a stranger when I thought I would be a stranger to my own family for the rest of my life. The second source of unexpected welcoming was the church. When I came out, I was committed to keeping my sexuality a secret, like I said before, but I wasn't going to tell anybody, especially people in the church. This was the last place I thought I would be welcomed. But again, I was wrong. I had been to many churches before Trinity, each with their own approach, but I never felt like I was fully welcomed. I never felt like I was seen as someone who could bear the image of God. The welcoming attitude towards me was always conditional. Aaron, Lenora, and Stephen Catherine were the first pastors I ever told I was gay, and the friends I've made at Trinity were some of the first to fully see me for who I am. They all listened to me. They didn't ask me to change. They didn't ask me how my relationship with God was. They didn't tell me to pray more. They just welcomed me. I'll never forget the time Lenora preached before serving communion one Wednesday night and said the words, all are welcome here. I don't care if you're gay or straight, black or white. This is God's table. And that has stuck with me, and that is ultimately what has kept me in the United Methodist Church. And despite the decision at General Conference, I know I am welcomed here. And just like tonight's scripture ends with Jesus breaking bread and handing it to his disciples, he has been revealed to me here at Trinity as he was to the disciples. The veil of the stranger is lifted, and I feel welcome. And this has been one of the most profound experiences of my life, because for the first time in my life, the love of Christ was modeled for me, and reflecting on these experiences in turn helps me welcome the strangers in my life. Only when we have welcomed the strangers, only when we have welcomed and recognized the times when we were strangers, can we start moving towards hospitality and seeing others as fellow bearers of the image of God, like the disciples did. Similar to my experiences with my family and my church, hospitality should create a free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality should not seek to change people, but create a space for people to change. I'll say that one more time. Hospitality should not seek to change people, but create a space for people to change. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say, I have nothing against gay people, I just don't agree with their lifestyle. Or, we welcome LGBT people here just as long as they stay single. This is a really good example of creating a space but trying to change someone. And a really good quote that I've recently kept close to me, I heard from actor and speaker Terry Crews, who was on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah one night. And in an interview, he said, and he was asking about his past, and he said, you can't love someone and control them at the same time. And once again, hospitality should not seek to change people, but create space for change to take place. We come to church in need of healing, not of judgment. So how do we welcome a stranger, like the disciples did at the end of tonight's passage? Creating space for others is not easy and requires hard work and commitment. In all, we must have radical humility. We need to dig deep, do inner work, and reflect on those people and experiences when we were welcomed as a stranger. Developing this awareness allows us to recognize our strengths and limitations, preventing our natural inclination to be fearful or hesitant. Through humility, we must also recognize when we were strangers, that when we welcome strangers, we can't impose our way of thinking and our belief system on them. We can't change other people's convictions or even change others by our convictions. But we can invite others into a space where they feel welcomed, where they can work on their own interchange and transformation between them and God. Ask yourself, who are the strangers in your life? They could be the homeless person in downtown Gainesville, or they could be individuals in your own family or friend group. And lastly, we have to recognize that we are all strangers in the world. We are all part of the same human story in search of love and acceptance. We're pretty far removed from the events that took place in the Scripture, as well as Jesus' crucifixion, death, and resurrection. But the Messiah dwells alongside each of us every day, whispering, "Here I am. Do you see me?" We just don't always recognize it. However, as soon as we welcome the stranger and break down the walls of our fears and insecurities and offer to break bread with them, the image of God radiates. Christ reveals